I used to think mornings were the safest time. Coffee in hand, headphones in, the world still half asleep. Routine made everything predictable until she slipped into it. It started small. A Tuesday morning, laundromat humming with the low churn of machines. I was leaning against the folding table, staring at the rotating shirts like they might say something back. She came in with a wicker basket balanced against her hip. "Morning," she said, almost casual. I nodded back, too quick. "Yeah, morning." Her voice stayed with me longer than it should have. Not the words, just the calm way she'd said them. Like she wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. I started noticing her after that. She always came with a thermos tucked under her arm. Always wore the same kind of jacket, practical, beige, nothing that tried too hard. She was in her 40s, maybe mid, dark hair tied back in a way that made me think she hadn't looked in the mirror twice. And yet, every time she walked past me, something in the air shifted. One morning, the vending machine jammed while I was trying to get a coffee. She walked by and slowed, watching me struggle. "Those things hate everyone," she said. I laughed, softer than I meant to. "Guess it's personal, though." Her smile flickered, not wide, but enough to make me notice the corner of her mouth. She tilted her thermos like proof she'd learned her lesson years ago. I didn't ask what was inside, but I wondered. It became a pattern. Not conversations exactly, just threads. A nod across the dryers, a comment about the weather that somehow felt like more than the weather. Once, she asked if I lived nearby. I told her upstairs, 3rd floor. She said she was on the 2nd. Neighbor. Just like that, the word hung between us. I told myself it was nothing. But then, I'd catch myself checking the time before heading down, hoping maybe I'd catch her routine. Sometimes she was there, sometimes not. On the days she wasn't, I folded my laundry slower, as if waiting. It wasn't attraction in the usual way, more like quiet recognition. She remembered I liked my coffee black. I noticed she always folded towels first. Those details stayed. One evening, after a late freelance project, I found myself staring at my phone. My thumb hovered over a half-written message to no one in particular. Just a thought about the rain tapping the window. I didn't send it. I never do. The screen dimmed, and in the silence, I caught myself thinking of her instead. The next morning, I almost didn't go down. But the pile of clothes left me no choice. She was already there, pulling a shirt from the dryer. The sleeve slipped from her hand, brushing against the floor. I bent down at the same time she did, and for a second we were too close. Her hand pulled back, almost startled, like she hadn't expected anyone to bridge the distance. "Sorry," I muttered, handing it over. She shook her head, her eyes darting away quickly. But then, softer, "Thanks." Silence stretched, longer than it needed to. I folded my jeans too carefully, lining up seams that didn't matter. She capped her thermos and lingered by the door, like she was about to say something. But she didn't. Instead, my phone buzzed as I picked up my laundry. A text. Unknown number. "Coffee upstairs. M." I looked up, but she was already gone. I didn't answer the text right away. I stared at it, reread it, locked my phone, then unlocked it again. My first thought was that it wasn't from her. Maybe a wrong number. Maybe someone else in the building. But the initial, M, kept circling in my head. When I finally walked upstairs with my laundry basket, the hallway was quiet. Only the faint sound of a kettle hissing behind her door. I stood there too long, debating. Then the door opened. She was holding 2 mismatched mugs. "You came," she said simply, like it had already been decided. I nodded, awkward, shifting the basket against my hip. I wasn't sure if it was me. She cut in, not unkindly. The text. I followed her inside. The apartment felt lived in, not curated. Books stacked on the coffee table, a throw draped over the arm of the couch. A faint lemon scent lingered. She poured tea into both mugs, sliding one across to me. "I'm more of a coffee person," I admitted. "I know." Her mouth curved slightly. "But it's too late for coffee." We sat across from each other, mugs between our hands, steam curling. For a moment, the silence pressed too heavy. I didn't know if I was supposed to fill it. She did instead. "My daughter used to hate this tea," she said suddenly, almost like she hadn't meant to. She said it tasted like grass. "I still drink it, though." I hesitated. "Daughter? She's in college now?" Out east. Her voice softened on the last word. Then she looked at me, steady. That's why this is strange. Sitting here with you. The age difference. It landed without her naming it directly. I forced a smile, but my chest tightened. I don't think it's strange. Don't you? Her eyes lingered on me, searching. I looked down at the mug, noticing a chip near the rim. My thumb brushed it like an excuse not to meet her gaze. I wanted to say something casual, something to cut through the weight. Instead, I asked, "Do you ever get used to being alone?" She leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. You don't. You just learn to disguise it. Her answer stuck in me, sharper than I expected. I thought of my own unsent texts, the quiet nights where the hum of the fridge was the only sound. We talked around the edges of things after that. She asked what I did. I told her about freelance design, the irregular hours, the way work seemed to bleed into night. She told me about the hospital where she worked, the long shifts, the way she came home and couldn't sleep right away. At some point, she laughed, a real one this time, when I admitted I once fell asleep mid-Zoom call with a client. The sound filled the room in a way that made me sit straighter, wanting to be the cause again. But beneath it all, there was a thread I couldn't ignore. A quiet question running under every pause. Why am I here? Why did she ask me? I imagined it. Her daughter, closer to my age than she was. A family photo in a frame, maybe tucked somewhere out of sight. The thought made me shift uncomfortably, even as I wanted to stay in that chair for hours. When I finally set my empty mug down, she reached to take it. Her hand brushed mine, brief, almost nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I looked up. She looked back. The air between us thinned. "Thanks for coming," she said softly, pulling the mugs toward her. I nodded, too quickly. My throat felt dry. "Yeah, sure. Anytime." I left with my laundry basket heavier than when I came in, though it was empty. The hallway smelled faintly of her lemon cleaner. Later, lying on my bed, I replayed it all. Her words, her laugh, the way her hand grazed mine. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that night with the tea, I started noticing her in sharper focus. The sound of her door clicking shut, the way her footsteps slowed on the stairs if she heard mine. But something shifted. She didn't text again. No invitation. No late-night tea. Just small acknowledgments in the hallway. A nod. A faint smile that never quite reached her eyes. One Saturday, I found her in the courtyard, kneeling by a cracked flower pot, soil smudged on her wrist. She looked up, brushing hair from her face, almost startled. "Oh, morning. Morning." I crouched, gesturing to the pot. "Need help?" She hesitated, then handed me the trowel. Our fingers grazed. Quick, deliberate not deliberate. She cleared her throat. "It's nothing. Just something to keep me busy." We worked in silence, the kind that felt louder than words. My knees ached against the stone, but I stayed. I wanted to stay. At one point, she sat back on her heels, dirt on her palms. "You shouldn't spend your time like this." I frowned. "Why not?" Her eyes darted away. "Because it's—" She stopped. "Never mind." The unfinished word hung there. "Because it's what?" "Wrong." "Obvious." Before I could press, a voice broke in. Mr. Feldman from down the hall shuffled past, giving us both a too long glance. He nodded at me, then at her, then kept going. Nothing said, but everything implied. She stiffened, brushing soil from her hands too quickly. "You should get back inside. You'll ruin your clothes." I wanted to protest. Instead, I stood, wiping my palms on my jeans, lingering a second too long. Her face softened, like she regretted pulling back, but she didn't stop me from leaving. That evening, I found myself pacing, waiting. Finally, I heard the faint clink of her window opening. From mine, just above, I could see the top of her head, lamplight spilling behind her. She looked down into the courtyard, arms resting on the sill. I slid my own window open. "Hey." Her head lifted, startled, then eased. "Hey." We stayed like that, windows to windows, the cool air between us. She spoke first. "Sometimes I wonder how much people notice." "Notice what?" "This." Her hand gestured vaguely. "Us talking. Sitting in courtyards. Sharing tea." I swallowed. "Maybe they don't notice at all." She gave a faint smile, tired. Or maybe they noticed too much. The silence stretched, humming with what neither of us said. My hand gripped the sill, knuckles pale. Hers traced absent circles on the wood. For one reckless moment, I thought about climbing down to her window. It felt possible, too possible. Instead, I said, voice low, "Do you ever wish?" But the word stuck. Her gaze lifted to mine, steady, unblinking. A question in her eyes. An answer in mine. Then she shut the window. Soft. Final. But not final enough to forget that it happened on a Tuesday night, after rain. The courtyard stones still wet, the smell of damp earth rising. I was coming back from a grocery run, plastic bags cutting into my fingers, when I saw her sitting on the bench beneath the old elm tree. She wasn't looking at anything, just her hands folded in her lap. Still in her work clothes, hair pulled back loosely, a faint shadow under her eyes. I paused, half thinking I should keep walking. But she looked up, and that was enough. Long day? I asked, dropping the bags at my feet. You could say that. She gestured at the empty space beside her. I sat. The bench creaked. The silence between us felt heavier than the air. She exhaled slow. You're young. You don't waste nights like this sitting on benches. I half smiled. Maybe I do. Her head turned, eyes catching mine for a fraction too long. Then she looked away, brushing at a raindrop clinging to the sleeve of her coat. I saw you with her, she said suddenly. It caught me off guard. With who? The girl from upstairs. Second floor. She was laughing at something you said. I blinked. That was nothing. Just bumped into her in the lobby. Her jaw tightened, barely noticeable. Nothing, she repeated, softer, almost to herself. And that was when I realized she wasn't asking. She was telling herself. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, searching for words that didn't sound foolish. I didn't know you noticed. I noticed too much, she murmured. Then, after a pause, that's the problem. The bench creaked again as she shifted, shoulders pulled in like she was trying to make herself smaller. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. I frowned. Here? On the bench. She gave the faintest laugh, dry, almost bitter. Here. With you. Sitting like this. Talking like this. It's not appropriate. The word hung between us, too sharp, like glass. I wanted to argue, but instead I said, then why let it happen? Her eyes flicked to mine, startled. For a second, it felt like the whole night tilted toward her answer. She swallowed, voice low. Because it feels good to not be invisible. I looked at her, really looked. The tired lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her hands twisted in her lap. She wasn't saying it to invite me closer. She was saying it like she'd finally dropped the weight she'd been carrying. Something caught in my throat. You're not invisible. Her laugh was barely there. Not to you. The rain started again, light, pattering against the leaves above us. Neither of us moved. I thought of leaning closer, of telling her the truth, the whole mess of it, that I thought about her more than I wanted to, that I waited for the sound of her steps in the stairwell, that the silence in my apartment felt heavier on the days I didn't see her. Instead, I said, sometimes I think about what it would be like if this were different. Her head tilted, eyes steady on me. Different how? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The words felt too dangerous, too irreversible. Her hand shifted on the bench between us, close enough that I could feel the warmth of it. She didn't move closer. Neither did I. But the space between our hands felt like the whole world. The rain thickened, drops hitting the plastic bags at my feet. Still, I didn't stand. Neither did she. Her voice broke the silence, softer than the rain. What are we doing? The question lingered, raw and unanswered, as the night closed in around us. The morning after the bench, I waited for her. Not intentionally. Just slower with my coffee, quieter on the stairs, listening. But I didn't hear her door. By the third day, it wasn't subtle anymore. She was gone before I left, or not home when I returned. The familiar signs, her thermos on the ledge, the faint hum of her radio, disappeared. The silence stretched wider. I told myself not to notice. But I did. Every time. Then, a week later, I saw her. She was coming out of the building, dressed nicer than usual, hair brushed smooth, makeup faint but careful. Someone was waiting for her by the curb. A man. Not young, not old either. He opened the passenger door for her. She hesitated before sliding in. I kept walking, pretending my keys were fascinating. That image stayed with me. Her profile through the window, her hand resting on her lap, still as stone. That night, she texted. Just 2 words, busy lately. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. Busy with what? With him? With trying to erase me? 2 days later, I saw her again, but this time inside the laundry room. She was folding clothes, movements sharper, quicker. She didn't look up when I walked in. Hey, I said, tentative. She nodded. Hey. The room filled with the thrum of the machines, the smell of detergent. I wanted to ask her about the man. Instead, I said, haven't seen you around. Work, she said flatly. Then, after a pause, and other things. I almost asked, but something in her posture, straight back, eyes fixed on the towel she was folding, kept me quiet. When she finally glanced at me, it was brief, but her expression had changed. Guarded. You should be careful, she said softly. Careful of what? Her mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head. Forget it. The conversation died there. I folded my shirts too carefully just to stay longer. But she finished first, stacking her basket against her hip. Her goodbye was quick, clipped. That night, I wrote out a message on my phone. Did I do something wrong? I typed, erased, retyped. My thumb hovered over send. But I locked the screen instead. The days blurred. Some mornings, I'd catch sight of her car leaving, her profile faint through the windshield. Other nights, I thought I heard her voice in the hallway, only to realize it was someone else. And then, unexpected, I ran into her at the corner store, both of us reaching for the same carton of milk. She froze, hand inches from mine. Sorry, she murmured, pulling back. It's fine, I said quickly. Too quickly. We stood in the cramped aisle, neither moving. She looked tired, more than usual. Then, almost as if speaking to herself, she said, my ex-husband's back in town. The words landed heavy. Ex-husband. So that was him. She didn't explain further. She didn't have to. The careful makeup, the sudden distance, the clipped conversations, they made sense now. I nodded, though my throat felt dry. I see. Her eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, soft and almost apologetic. Then she turned, basket in hand, and walked away. I paid for nothing. Just left, empty-handed, the bell above the door jangling too cheerfully. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the glow of my phone screen. I typed again, if you need someone, but the words looked pathetic. I deleted them. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The message box stayed empty, the send button untouched, and her window stayed dark. That IT was late when I heard it. The sound of her key fumbling against the lock. I was in my kitchen, lights low, laptop screen still open but forgotten. Through the thin walls, I heard her sigh, heavy and tired. On impulse, I opened my door. She was standing in the hallway, still in her work clothes, hair loose around her face. A grocery bag dangled from one hand, almost slipping. You okay? I asked, softer than I meant to. She startled, then forced a small smile. Long shift. Let me help. I reached for the bag. She hesitated, then let it go, her fingers brushing mine. The bag wasn't heavy, but the weight of the exchange sat between us. Inside her apartment, the kitchen light was on, a soft yellow glow. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, rubbed her temple. I set the bag on the counter, pulling out bread, milk, a bundle of herbs. You didn't have to, she said. I wanted to. The words hung there. Too bare, too direct. She looked at me. Really looked, and I couldn't read her expression. She pulled 2 glasses from the cupboard, filled them with water, handed one to me. For a while, we just stood there, leaning against opposite counters, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. Finally, she spoke. He wants to try again. My chest tightened. Your ex. She nodded, eyes on her glass. It's ridiculous. We've been over for years. But habits are hard to kill. Familiarity's a powerful thing. I swallowed. And you? Her pause was long. Too long. I don't know. The admission wasn't loud, but it was raw. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. and she pressed her lips together like she regretted letting it slip. I set my glass down, fingers tightening on the counter's edge. My heart beat too loud in my chest. "I need to ask you something." She looked up, wary. "Do you want me to stop?" Her brow furrowed. "Stop what?" "This." I gestured between us. "Talking. Showing up. Waiting for whatever this is." Her hand tightened on her glass. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the sink, set her glass down carefully, and stayed there, back turned. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low I almost missed it. "I don't want you to stop." The room felt smaller. My throat burned. "Then why?" "Because it scares me," she cut in, turning around, eyes shining with something she didn't name. "The age. The stories people will tell. My daughter. Him. All of it. It feels like standing on thin ice." I took a step closer, slow, cautious, like testing each word. "It scares me too." For the first time, her shoulders dropped, the fight leaving her. She gave a soft, tired laugh, not from humor, but from release. "God, we sound pathetic." I shook my head. "No, just honest." We stood there, the space between us narrowing, not from movement, but from what was finally said out loud. She reached for the bread on the counter, tore off a piece absent-mindedly, then stopped. Her hand lingered there. "This could ruin a lot of things. Or it could make them real," I said quietly. The words landed, simple, heavy. She didn't argue. She didn't agree either. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint lemon on her skin, the long day still clinging to her. Her hand brushed mine, deliberate this time. No accident. Just contact. I looked at her. She looked back. And then, nothing more. No kiss. No collapse. Just her hand resting against mine on the counter. "Okay," she whispered, almost to herself. And it was enough. Time didn't change overnight. It never does. But it shifted. We stopped pretending not to notice each other. The hesitations grew shorter, the silences less loaded. She didn't text often, but she knocked sometimes. 3 quick taps on my door after a long shift, usually holding that old thermos. I started keeping tea in my kitchen, though she still teased me about my black coffee. One Saturday morning, weeks later, we ended up on the same bench again. The same one from that rainy night. The elm leaves had begun to fall, yellow and brittle around our feet. She sat first, brushing off the wood with her sleeve. I joined her, careful not to sit too close, though closeness didn't feel dangerous anymore. "You're still young," she said, echoing her old line. But this time her voice held warmth instead of warning. "And you still notice too much," I replied, smiling. Her eyes softened. No laugh, just the faintest upward curve of her mouth, like she remembered exactly when those words were said. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat. Sometimes that was enough. Later, routines became ours. Sunday mornings at 8:47 a.m., not 8:45, not 9 o'clock. She'd knock, holding 2 mugs. 1 tea, 1 coffee. We'd sit in my kitchen or hers, whichever was warmer, the sound of the kettle filling the pauses between us. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a story you'd recognize from movies. It was grocery runs where she reminded me to buy vegetables. It was me fixing the loose hinge on her cupboard. It was her sitting at my desk while I worked late, reading quietly until I closed the laptop. Her ex drifted back out of the picture. I never asked how or why. She never explained. Maybe it wasn't about winning or losing, just about choosing. And she chose this. Messy, simple, fragile. One evening, she came up to my place, hair damp from a shower, wearing an oversized sweater. She poured tea into the chipped mug she once handed me that first night and set it in front of me. "You still think it tastes like grass?" she asked. I shook my head, sipping. "Not anymore." She smiled at that. A small thing, but it felt like a door closing softly on an old memory. Life wasn't perfect. Some days she was quiet, retreating into herself. Some nights I stayed up too late, pacing, wondering if I was enough, if the difference between us would crack open again. But then she'd brush her hand against mine as we passed in the hallway, or sit on the bench with me after rain, and I'd remember. We weren't looking for perfect, just something that felt real. One morning, months later, we crossed paths in the laundry room again, just like before. Same hum of machines, same smell of detergent. But this time, when the vending machine refused to give me my coffee, she didn't just smile. She pressed her thermos into my hand. "Don't fight with it," she said softly. I took a sip. The tea was warm, faintly bitter, not coffee at all. But I didn't mind. She looked at me, and I knew she remembered too. The first nods, the first silences, the first times we both pretended not to wait for each other. And now here we were, no longer pretending. I don't know if it was love in the way people expect it, but it was ours. Quiet, steady, unspoken. Enough to carry us. And as I set her thermos back on the table, I caught her eye and said, almost without thinking, "Okay." She smiled, the kind of smile you can only give someone who's been there through the pauses. It was the only answer either of us needed.